Good afternoon, everyone. This is the joint meeting of the Student Affairs Committee and the Emergency Management and Campus Safety Task Force, which is chaired by Governor Perez. I thank you all for coming, and we do have a quorum. Is that correct? This is correct. Okay. If you remember correctly, after the Virginia Tech tragedy about a year ago, President Bush asked all of the governors of the 50 states to analyze the steps taken to improve security and safety on college and university campuses. Governor Christ convened a task force, and in addition to holding multiple meetings and hearings, asked board staff to survey public and private institutions. The final report from the gubernatorial task force contained a series of recommendations. In June, the Board of Governors took up the issues related to the campus security as they were laid out in the final report of the gubernatorial task force, and Governor Perez began to address those through subcommittees, and then the Student Affairs Committee appointed a subcommittee on mental health, which has taken a good bit of time to go through the practices and procedures, and all of those subcommittees are prepared to report today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Governor Perez to take up the bulk of the recommendations relating to everything but mental health.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank Chair McDivitt as well as members of the Student Affairs Committee to agreeing to a joint meeting today so we can take the recommendations in and respond to them and hopefully move them through the process today. Before we begin the task force meeting, however, I want to call on Chancellor Rosenberg for a particular introduction.
Mr. Chair, good afternoon. Good afternoon, members of the Board of Governors. I just wanted to take a moment to make sure that you recognize two individuals here who served on Governor Christ's Campus Safety and Security Task Force, who really did a lot of heavy lifting. The first is Marbeli Hernandez. Marbeli, would you please stand up? A student, a president of student government at Florida International University, a political science major, who will be graduating in April, but who spent all of last summer traveling around the state to receive the testimony and go through the hearings that in part were served as an input for us in our deliberations. So thank you, Madam Hernandez. And then a second individual with whom we spent a lot of time, who was on the Campus Safety and Security Task Force as well, is Chief David Perry of Florida State University. Chief, would you please be recognized? We'd like to thank you for all your time. And of course, Mr. Chair, I just want to recognize other members of our campus police departments who are here today, who are very concerned about these issues, who are going to listen very intently to our deliberations, and who we're counting on to ensure that our students and our campus communities are safe and sound. If you all would please rise and be recognized so we could thank you appropriately. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor. As Chairman McDivitt pointed out, following the Virginia Tech tragedy, the Emergency Preparedness and Campus Safety Task Force Committee was charged by the Board of Governors Chair Carolyn Roberts with recommending policies and procedures dealing with campus safety and security. However, I want to make sure the record is clear that even before the tragedy at Virginia Tech, this Board of Governors, at Chancellor Rosenberg's direction, sat down and prepared the Emergency Management Task Force when we took a look in a survey of our universities and our campuses with regard to emergency response to hurricanes and other natural disasters. So at least we had a good jump on this process because of the foresight that this board and our Chancellor had exercised in the past. Nonetheless, at our June 14th meeting, I have appointed several sub-chairs to take a look at particular elements that we're going to be discussing today. I asked Governor Martin to chair the discussion on emergency notification systems. I asked Governor Parker to chair the campus safety discussion, and Governor Chase to chair the faculty and student training areas, and to identify at-risk students. Over the last 10 or 11 months, these committees have conducted meetings during the past myriad of days and weeks since that occurred. We've taken a look in, developed best practices, studied recommendations from various universities and across the country, from governmental agencies and other task force, particularly the gubernatorial task force referred to by Governor McDivitt and the National Governors Association, as well as worked in conjunction with the Department of Homeland Security. The reports we're going to hear today, which are going to be brought out, are the recommendations for our consideration as a task force and then for the Student Affairs Committee on the whole, and they are a result truly of several months of very hard work conducted by our board, but more importantly by our universities, by our university staff, by our security forces, and the whole team of the state university system that needs to keep our over 3,000 buildings and 380,000 students safe across the state. This isn't just a couple of universities placed here and there. We have over 3,000 buildings for which we are responsible, and 380,000 students and lives and faculty and staff that we're dealing with. It's very important. It's very large-scale work. The numbers are large, as is the task. So if the task force members are in agreement, I'd like to consider the recommendations that each of you make today at the very end. So I'll be asking you to make your reports, and then we'll collect all of those recommendations for the very end. For the record, by the way, I'm going to call on Governor Martin first. In the packets, and in the packets in the audience, we have included only the executive summary of the emergency notification report. It is very long, very complete, very thorough, and also very available online if you'd like to download it. But for budget constraints and paper constraints and saving a virtual forest today, we decided just to include the executive summary. So without further ado, at this time, let me recognize Governor Frank Martin, and we'll begin receiving reports. Governor Martin.
Thank you, Governor Perez. As the chair for the Emergency Notification Review Committee, the charge for this committee was to assess appropriate and relevant reports, studies, the legal requirements, and the costs related to emergency notification at our universities. All universities were represented on the committee. It was co-chaired by Kenneth Owl, Emergency Coordinator for the University of Florida, and by Peter Robinson, Director of Environmental Health and Safety, University of West Florida. I read reports, and we've had numerous telephone conferences going over in detail, page for page. They probably were a little bit surprised that I was willing to do that, but I think this is such a very important issue that we needed to make sure that everything was covered. We need to make sure that we have redundancy in our notification systems, and that is the key to campus safety. Most of our universities have some level of redundancy on their campuses. However, enhancement is needed in areas to identify by the universities that will be later discussed. Those enhancements are included on the yellow sheet that has been distributed. In your board packet, you have this yellow sheet. For those in the audience, it's out on the table. You may want to refer to that as we go along. At this point, I would like to ask Peter and Kenneth to provide the Board of Governors with examples of notification systems and the implementation at their universities, and at this point, I'd like to have them to come up and make their presentation. We'll have two demonstrations, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end.
Thank you, Governor Martin. At the University of West Florida, as with all the other universities, we all have various amounts of notification capability. One of the more important things, though, is given that you have the capability, you have to ensure that people are aware on your campus about those notification systems. One of the ways that we decided at the University of West Florida was to create a video which provided a background on some of our systems, and one of our main systems we were looking at in this video that we're about to show was our siren alert system. And we'll just put that on now. Hopefully it will all come up.
Hello, I'm David O'Brien, Associate Vice President for the newly formed Department of Public Safety and Management Services. Our department consists of 5 important units: University Police, Parking and Transportation Services, Procurement and Contracts, Facilities Management, and Environmental Health and Safety. When our new department was born on September 1st, 2007, we made campus communications our primary goal. This video is one of the tools we chose in helping us communicate our mission of safety and service to the UWF campus community, and at the same time showcase the many fine women and men who make up our organization. The short video you're about to see presents our new and upgraded emergency alert system. This video is the first in what we hope to be a series of videos that will touch on myriad of topics and issues that are addressed daily by our department. So sit back, relax, and prepare to be informed.
When we have an emergency on campus, such as a fire or a chemical spill or a tornado, there are certain things we must do right away. So the campus community needs to be warned so they can take action.
In Pensacola, where the University of West Florida is located, we're subject to severe weather, hurricanes, tornadoes, and additionally, we're also on the north side of the campus surrounded by chemical factories.
One emergency that could happen, and something that's made national news frequently, is an active shooter. If we have an active shooter on campus, there are immediate things that we all must do, and people must be warned right away to take these actions. We recently had a tornado situation in Pensacola where tornadoes touched down in the downtown area, and it appeared that tornadoes could come to our campus. We decided to alert the campus using our siren system, which immediately told people that there is a problem and to start preparing for an emergency right away.
The emergency siren alert system that we have on campus is controlled out of the University Police Department. And the person who would make the call as to when to set off the system is the police chief. He's usually has a lot of information that nobody else on campus would have, and so the ultimate decision is his.
Some of the components of our emergency warning system include a siren system on campus with loudspeakers to give instructions on what to do when there is an emergency. Additionally, we have a mass email system through Argus where we send messages to everyone with a computer and an email address on campus. We also have our phone mail system where the phone mail system sends a message to every telephone on campus. We also have our emergency website on campus, which is updated during an emergency.
When the siren alert system was being initiated, we had engineers come onto campus. They did an evaluation of the best place to locate the sirens, and there are 4 of them on campus. One's located behind Building 36. One's located beside Building 82, the Fine Arts Building. Another one is located beside the Health and Leisure Sports Facility. And another one, the final one, is located in the baseball field area.
Of course, when the system is sounded, the alarm will sound first, getting one's attention, and then instructions will be broadcast through the public address system.
To the UWF emergency announcement system, this is only a test. If it had been an actual emergency, instructions will be broadcasted. This concludes this test of the UWF emergency announcement system.
When the siren system is activated, anybody, students, staff, faculty, who hear this system going off should immediately seek shelter, get into a building. And when you get into that building, then look for other sources of information to find out exactly what the emergency is. You can check your email, listen to the radio, phone, There will be additional messages coming out. The siren system is just an immediate notification to the campus.
It's very important to follow those instructions, but also we have a personal responsibility, all of us, to pass the word to others. Chances are not everyone will hear both the siren and the public address system. Many people may hear the siren and not the voice instructions. So if the siren goes off and you hear the voice instructions, please pass the word on to others who may not have heard the information.
We hope you found this presentation to be informative and useful. The emergency siren alert system could be your first step to safety. On behalf of all the dedicated men and women of public safety and management services, we thank you for watching. Until next time, stay safe, stay together.
I'd like to apologize to the audience for your inability to see the video. The lights were making it kind of hard to see it on the screen. I've been told that the presentation will be posted on the Board of Governors website. And actually, if you'd like to go to numerous websites at the University of West Florida, it is also posted so that students, faculty, staff can at any time look at the video. And we've made presentations to the President's extended cabinet showing this video. We've been to the Staff Senate, and they've been made aware of it. So we've tried to put this out to everybody on campus to make sure that they know that we have these systems out there, and that when they hear it, they'll understand, what they're supposed to do. And I thank you for your attention on that one.
Good afternoon, Governors. As Governor Martin said, I'm Kenneth Owl, and I serve as the Emergency Management Coordinator for the University of Florida. So what we wanted to do, in addition to the report, is look at a couple of systems that we have at the University of Florida that we operate in conjunction with the Alachua County Sheriff's Office, which is our host sheriff's office. And they're both web applications. I'll go through the first one. And it is what's often referred to as a reverse 911 style system, although that's actually a trademark name. And hopefully you'll be able to see that on the monitors there. So we have access to this, both environmental health and safety and our University Police Department. So our Police Department Communications Center would probably be the primary user on this specific tool. And I will log in. And so since we operate this jointly or in partnership with the Alachua County Sheriff's Office, when it logs in, you'll be able to see the entire map of Alachua County, and then I'll zoom in to the campus. And this provides a tool if we were wanting to notify a specific geographic area of campus. So we wouldn't be calling on this tool the entire campus, but more if we had an isolated incident that involved a sector of campus, a handful of buildings, something of that nature. We could use this. And what we have entered in here are the UF-controlled phones. So we have about 18,000 UF, primarily office and classroom telephones that are in here. So you can start to see as I zoom in further the outline of the University of Florida, and I'll actually bring it down to building level. And so you can kind of see the central part of campus there. Ben Hill Griffith Stadium was up in the northwest part of that view, so if I clicked on the wrong button, I apologize. So as I zoom back out, you can start to see a feel for campus. So what would happen if there was an incident, and I won't actually do it for real, but the University Police Department could come in here, draw out what was the impacted area using any of the different tools, whether it's a circle or a square or user-defined polygon. Just click on the UF telephones, which we can see over here. And you can see there would be over where the cursor is 625 telephones in that area. So then if we were going to actually activate it for an event, you would click on activate. It would walk you through, allow you to type in a user-defined message indicating what the impacted area was, what you were asking the people in that those building or that specific building to do, whether that's shelter in place, whether that's evacuate. You could give them specific instructions. You would send that message out. Again, it would call UF-operated telephones in that area. So that's, again, what's usually referred to as a reverse 911 style system. And I'll log out of this system and open up the one we'll actually demonstrate today, which is Geocast. They're both products under a company called Dialogic, but they're two completely different suites, if you will. So for this tool, we use to notify predetermined groups of people. So for example, we have our building emergency coordinators in there that we could call, get a message out, and they would be responsible for disseminating that within their building. And several departments have access to this. So for example, the Senior Vice President for Health Affairs Office has been working to put different groups into that so they can notify their key people if there was an event down at the Health Science Center on the south side of our campus. Even departments such as Baby Gator, which is an on-campus daycare at the University of Florida, is looking to put the parents of their children in there. So if there was an active shooter or some type of event on campus, they could rapidly notify all of their parents without tying up staff time of calling 100 parents or 100 guardians or so. So for the purpose of this demonstration, we'll actually call it. I was given about 19 telephone numbers from different people. I entered those in yesterday, so you would just click on the group you wanted to activate. We'll activate the scenario. I'll show you what I mean by being able to type in a message once that comes up. And so there are different variables you can put in here. For this simple exercise, we're only going to call cell phones, but you could put in almost any type of communication device. You can call someone's cell phone, someone's work phone, someone's office phone, their pager, even their fax machines. So you could really reach out, and the system will not stop until it gets in touch and the person responds to that. We'll do a simple one for this where we only call 2 times. If you acknowledge it, it will only call you 1 time, and we'll only be calling the cell phones provided. For the message option, again, the University Police Department or Environmental Health and Safety or one of the other groups will be able to type in a customized message based on what the event is or would be. And as with any demonstration, it runs slow. And this is in addition to our campus-wide text messaging system, which is a separate system in which we could text message. As of today, there were slightly over 50,000 faculty, staff, and students in that system. That's a different application we have for doing that. But it would be the same type system. The vendor provides a secure website where we would log in, be able to send a customized message, and then send it out to the campus community. And I apologize for the delay on this. So simply type in what the message is, render the speech on the message, which should only take a second, which I thought the other would do, and then I'll send the message out. And when you receive the message, if you were the ones who provided your cell phone, you'll simply answer it like you would a normal message. It'll be a voice message. You'll answer it, say hello. It'll ask you to press a key on your numeric key, enter the key, any of the number keys. You'll receive the message, and at the end, it'll ask you for the option to either repeat the message or, if you've understood it and you're satisfied with it, to enter in a key there. So the message has gone out. Hopefully our cell phones will be ringing in about 30 seconds, and it should take almost no time. There were only 19 cell phones in there, so they should almost come simultaneously. There you have it. Great.
It's your wife, Mark.
So that's the system, and then obviously it provides reporting. We won't take the time to look at that, but if you were sending it to a group in which you wanted some accountability that they actually received it, you would have a report on file that would indicate by either telephone or by that person's name whether or not they received the message. Okay. Thank you very much, Governors.
I was following you out.
Okay. We felt that it was important to have a demonstration of the various systems that we have operating on university campuses. And the yellow sheet that's in your packet, it shows that in the university system, redundancy, again, is the key to the day. Because you need to have more than one system in order to notify the students, the faculty, and the staff at the respective universities and the community at large in terms of what is actually going on. So at this point, are there any questions from any of the board members?
Actually, Evan, I had a question or two. Particularly with regard to the West Florida video, how many times has it been watched? Are people looking at it? How are you distributing it to make sure it's being seen, and how's it been received?
Well, it's been very well received. As I said, when we first completed the video, which actually was not too long ago, we presented it to the president and the extended cabinet, which is all the vice presidents, associate vice presidents, deans, and whatnot, and they thought it was very good. It laid it all out for them. As I say, we've had it shown to the staff senate. It's located on the Environmental Health and Safety website. It's located on the Public Safety and Management Services main website. You can access it from the uwfemergency.org website, which is a specific website for emergency information off of our main page. So there's a number of different ways that it can be accessed.
And are students actually hitting the video and watching it?
Don't have any information on that specifically just yet. As I say, we just posted it not too long ago. However, recently, just Monday actually, we had, the President has initiated an annual, President Kavanaugh has initiated an annual campus safety forum where myself, the police chief, some folks from ITS, student affairs, go over all the emergency information that we can provide to the campus, and it's done in the Student Union auditorium. And we had just this past Monday, and we had a very good showing, and surprisingly enough, it was populated with a lot of students. And that was we were very pleased about that. It was advertised campus-wide through email to the faculty staff listservs and to the student listservs. And the students did participate and turn up. And actually, of course, I have my part of that presentation. And afterwards, after the entire forum was over, I ended up talking longer and more to students than I did during the presentation itself. So it actually went very well, and this is sort of an annual thing that President Kavanaugh has set up. So,
Governor Park?
When I guess just received the call, there seemed to be a pretty long delay in the time that I actually answered the phone and actually started to hear anyone talk. Can you talk about that for me? Because I think I probably would have hung up before the person started talking.
And that's something we can certainly look into, whether that was just for this test or all the time. That is a concern. One of the issues is because also sometimes you're getting voicemail, sometimes there's a little delay to make sure the device actually picks up. But that is all user adjustable, so I will certainly take that and go back and we'll look at the system, and we may need to shorten that delay from the time of someone answering to you actually hear the message. We did try to do a custom piece at the beginning, so you should have heard before the variable message a recorded voice saying this is a notification from the University of Florida, because we did want the first thing someone hears not to be a computer-generated voice, but to be someone saying this is a message from the University of Florida, to try to eliminate someone hanging up or not taking the message.
Can I get that one follow-up question? So, and you may have mentioned this in your report and I missed it, or in your earlier comments, is it that when a student registers, like, when do students become aware that their phone numbers may be used, I guess, to have them contacted in case of an emergency?
Yes, ma'am. And on this specific system, there would be limited students in. This is more for predetermined groups. But on our overall text messaging system, which is another tool, is mandatory for students to be involved. So the way that worked is beginning this semester was the first semester was in effect. So during the fall semester, the end of that, when they were registering for spring classes, before they could actually register for their classes, and obviously that's an automated process done through a software called ISIS, before they could even get to the screen to register for classes, they had to provide their emergency contact information. So not just their cell phone, but they had to provide their local address. If they had a different permanent address, they had to provide that, and they had to provide kind of a next of kin type information. And to answer your specific question, included in that were some information saying this will be used for emergency notifications. And then that was also included, or that process also included public education and outreach about what was going on. And fortunately, the students were very receptive to that. We had several positive editorials in the student newspaper, The Alligator, and also our system had the endorsement of the Student Government Association. They had been one of the leaders actually pushing for it. So despite being a mandatory system, there was almost no pushback from the students on having to give their information before they could register for classes. They were very receptive for having a way the university could reach them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from any board members? As we close out this particular section, I just want to acknowledge the fact that in the last week we had an incident at Florida A&M University, and there's an editorial today from the chair of the local Chamber of Commerce commending FAMU for their efforts in responding. And if I can just take the liberty to read one section. Without hesitation or flinching, FAMU leaders secured the entire campus, particularly a large and vulnerable student population, by instantly notifying about the dangers and the warnings in specific areas to avoid. All of this was as a result of high-tech messaging system, which reached the largest number of people in the fastest possible time. So again, it appears that the system is working. Each university, as they have a particular incident, would handle them differently, depending upon how they're going to manage that. But looking at your police departments and your emergency coordinators, they are working very, very well together in making it happen. At this point, there are a number of recommendations. Governor Perez, and you're going to handle those at the end?
I'll handle them at the end, Governor Martin, but if you could just specify, I see them on the next page of the yellow. These are recommendations from each of the universities that they themselves have developed to bring them to the standard that they believe they need to be in order to ensure safety and security?
That's correct. Based on the representatives from all of the 11 universities on the committee, this is what they identified as what they needed to bring their systems current. However, I would like to state that we need to make sure 6 months, 9 months down the road that we have the opportunity to go back and make sure that, these are being implemented. And if so, what can we do to enhance? As technology changes, there may be a need to upgrade, some of these systems that are included here. But at this point, this is their listing coming directly from each of the universities.
Governor Parker?
I did have one question that you maybe would answer, Governor Martin. I noticed at the University of West Florida that there seems to be a special emphasis on emergency preparedness, and I'm sure it's in all of our universities. But do we find that there is a designated person on campus whose job it is to be the emergency preparedness person, so that's his or her only responsibility, or is it something that you find is done by one person with several different responsibilities?
I'm going to let staff handle that question. Regina?
Thank you, Governor Martin and Governor Parker. At 5 of the institutions, there are individuals whose positions are 100% FTE dedicated to emergency management. Those institutions are University of Florida, you see Kenneth here, University of Central Florida, we have Jeff Morgan here, University, Florida State, Dave Bujak, Florida Atlantic University, and Florida International University, which Charles Sorrell. So at 5 of our institutions, it is 100% FTE.
At the others, is that role currently filled by the chief of police?
There are shared responsibilities, again, here at University of West Florida. Peter Robinson, as the Environmental Health and Safety Director, holds that position or takes on some of those responsibilities, and typically it would either be with the Environmental Health and Safety Director, and there would be some overlap with the chiefs of police, or safety, someone in the police department.
Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Martin. As said, we will take up the recommendations all in a group. At this point, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Governor Parker. Governor Parker is going to present her committee report on public safety. Governor Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The State University System Chiefs of Police submitted the report that was contained in our agenda packets after deliberating on issues that were presented by the Gubernatorial Task Force on University Campus Safety. The issues involve accreditation, training, and staffing, and the task force asked, pardon me, I guess I'm reading these notes again, and that the task force asked the SUS to review. Chief Tom Longo, who is the chair of the SUS Chiefs of Police, is here today to respond to any questions that you may have about the Chief's report and their recommendations. The recommendations are contained on pages 12 through 18 of our board materials. One of the most important issues is the level of staffing for our police departments. And I want you please to refer to the green sheets that were contained in the brown folder that were there at your stations when you arrived. It will show you actually the actual ratio that's presented or available as it relates to the number of students on campus and the actual campuses. What's interesting about this is that it kind of gives you, a comparison and an opportunity to review what's available at each of the 11 state universities. You note that the second sheet identifies equipment needs to supplement current tools that our police departments have to respond to active shooters events were they to occur at one of our universities. What I'd like to do is ask Chief Longo if he would go ahead and kind of elaborate a little bit more on your findings. I want to thank you very much for the time you've taken to meet with me. Thank you. Thank the other chiefs of police as well for the time they've taken to really pull together this report. So without any further ado, Chief Longo, please.
Thank you, Governor Parker, and good afternoon, everyone. I want to take a moment to recognize my colleagues behind me. We have Chief Calvin Ross from Florida A&M University Police Department, Chief David Perry from FSU, and Chief Richard Berry from University of Central Florida. They've all promised to catch me in case I faint during this presentation. We took a look at the recommendations of the Gubernatorial Task Force, and the thing that stood out the most to us was the varying levels of staffing that we have at the different campuses. And when we broke that down, we looked at the student to police officer ratio as a measurement on each of the campuses. We thought that was fairly telling as far as where we need to catch up a little bit in terms of staffing. And the reason staffing is so vital to us, well, there's a lot of reasons, one of which probably first and foremost on everyone's mind, especially after Virginia Tech, Northern Illinois University, and even after FAM's shooting last Friday, is our ability to respond adequately to an active shooter incident. Literally seconds count. In the old paradigm, police would respond, they'd set up a perimeter around the location and wait for a SWAT team. That doesn't work anymore. Too many people are killed while waiting for the SWAT team. The new way of addressing these issues is to quickly intervene. The first officers responding go in, form a hasty team, go in and locate that shooter and stop the threat. To do that effectively, you need at least 4 police officers to form what we call a diamond to go in as a tactical formation in order to keep themselves safe and move safely through the corridors of a building. You also need officers on the outside to keep people from straying into a kill zone, and other officers to form a second team and a rescue team. Now, chances are none of our departments are going to be able to do all of that. Our initial response is to get to the scene, to form a hasty formation, get in there and intervene while we have help coming from other officers within our own departments. For example, these usually occur on day shift during classroom hours. There's plenty of police officers in the office, command staff that can come and assist, but also the municipal and the county agencies will be coming up behind us to assist us. Other reasons student-officer ratio is important in our staffing is the quality of the services we can provide to the students. The last thing students need to worry about on our campuses is their safety. And we've all been students, and we know when the urge strikes to write late at night, you might need to go to the library, you might need to go to a study group. It's their 4 years of opportunity to succeed. And what we try to do is reduce the anxiety level on our campuses so that they can think about scholarship and success rather than their personal safety. The best way for us to do that is to have police officers adequately staffed on the campuses and to provide not only the visible presence on the campus for the students' reduction of their anxiety, but also to keep the unpleasant element from off campus coming on to victimize our students. Anecdotally, at Florida or University of South Florida, 60% of the people we arrest annually, that's full custody arrest, are from off campus. That's a pretty telling figure that there are those out there that are trying to utilize our campuses as a shopping mall, for example, for whatever it is they happen to want. Crime prevention programming is also very, very important for our young students. They're often away from home for the first time, and we try to provide the kind of programming that keeps in their mind, without being intrusive or too distracting, their own responsibility for their safety, for their personal safety as well as for their belongings. So staffing is very important to the quality of services that we can provide. We think it blends into and contributes significantly to the academic environment and success of our students and the universities themselves. Another issue we looked at was attrition. That is a major problem for us. We compete with the local and county police forces for the most part for candidates. The law of supply and demand has caused quite a bit of turnover in many of our departments. And that's because police officers can get a few years of experience with us and move to another agency for better pay. That's the reason why we have the section in there on salary plans. However, that comes about in the future. If it does, we would hope that it be sufficiently competitive within our own regions that it's not an economic decision for police officers to move to another agency. It's a quality of life and type of work decision. If they want to move to a county department to do that kind of work, then so be it. We'd rather not have them make that decision on economic grounds. Also, equipment and training is a pressing issue for us. We have made some investments with existing resources during the last year. to address specifically active shooter, but we need more resources to flesh that out fully. One of our departments has a SWAT team. That's a great help because those officers are literally working day to day and they have their equipment with them. Others are catching up, buying equipment. My own department is in that position as well. The training that we need to do for active shooter is, of course, intensive training. And what that is we'll go out to a range facility and we will utilize what we call simunitions, which it fires a small chalk bullet, and it doesn't injure anybody too badly, but when it hits, it stings, and you know you've been hit. So there's some anxiety on the part of the officers being trained. Obviously, they don't want to be hit. We do training, scenario training. Someone will play the active shooter role, and officers will intervene. We'll have victims. We also do that kind of training in classroom buildings, which is a very realistic way of doing it, but obviously the timing has to be right vis-a-vis the students and the classes. The receptivity that the governors have shown in these issues has been really appreciated by the chiefs. We know the times are tough right now. The state economy is bad, the national economy is bad, and we know that tax revenues are down, and we deeply appreciate what the Board of Governors is doing to try to get some more resources into our departments so that we can meet this threat should it occur. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Longo. Any questions from the committee? Mr. Chairman.
Chief, we're putting a lot of emphasis on this 1 to 600 ratio. Is that the gold standard? Is there another metric out there that's used nationally, internationally, or is that pretty much it? 1 to 600, if you've got it, you're great. If you don't have it, you're not great. I mean, how is that metric used and what others may be available?
Well, it's fairly fluid if you look across the country. The gold standard is 1 to 500, or 2 per 1,000, which is published by the International Association of Chiefs of Police. That's an organization that is comprised of chief executives of law enforcement agencies from all over the world, heavily weighted to the United States, of course, but all kinds of police departments, small, medium, large urban departments, specialty departments such as universities, railroads, and so forth. That standard was put into place to facilitate community-oriented policing, to ensure that enough officers were out and about to actually have time to do that kind of policing. And I think the campus environment is probably the most intensive community-oriented policing environment anywhere, because we really need to get to know our environment, know our students, our staff, let them know us, and we need to dig in and find problems, hopefully before they actually occur, and abate them, so they can go about their business. The 1 to 600 standard was adopted by my colleagues and I in an effort to standardize and come into line with some of the better funded agencies across the 11 SUS institutions. It's close to the 1 to 500. Naturally, we'd like to get to 1 to 500, but I'm not sure with these budget times the way they are, if that's going to occur in the near future. We'd be very, very pleased with 1 to 600.
Do we have any idea how some of the other systems ratios are? California, North Carolina, any of those? Are they targeting this 1 to 500, 1 to 600 ratio as well?
Yes, sir. If you look in the last appendix to the report, it makes mention in there of private and public institutions nationally, and some are actually exceeding that ratio.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Chief Longo, I guess in looking at the recommendations, I noticed that issue 1 actually talks about a salary survey of Florida State University assistant police positions. Is that something that has already been tackled by your organization, or something that we need to have tackled by your organization?
Yes and no. It's been done off and on, but it needs to be updated. So we would be happy to put that all together.
And I guess my next question is as it relates to the actual idea of dealing with the salaries. I know that so often salary issues are really hard for, to address in budgets because they come up every year. It's not something that we can do like a one-time funding. And I guess my question to you is, did you all have any conversations, I guess, about bonus structures that may help us with this problem as opposed to having recurring funding? And can you talk to me about how that may work within your industry?
Within the municipal world, I'm not familiar with bonuses being given. And I'm not familiar with it in the university world really either. I know at University of South Florida this year in the collective bargaining, bonuses were a component of the pay increases. That is a very effective use of one-time monies. One-time monies for equipment also can be an effective multiplier for morale in a department. So yes, bonuses can have their place, definitely.
And I guess I offer that to you, and we did not previously discuss this, so I've been trying to think outside the box of ways that we can deal with, having a budget crunch crisis on us at this point, and not having to necessarily assign recurring funding, but maybe using something a little bit different to, I guess, encourage officers to stay, or to at least encourage others to, come join us. And I guess another question I have for you, if you can elaborate on the idea that fancy equipment really does act as a way to attract, and fancy is probably not a good word, let's say advanced equipment, or better, I want to say better guns, but that's not a fair thing to say, but advanced equipment is a better way to attract and keep officers within these departments?
Yes. Tools, we call them. Good tools are good to work with. They're fun to work with. They're easy to work with. They also provide the opportunity to build better cases for prosecution. For example, in-car video systems, what you see on cops or on TV programs where you'll see the suspects before the car, you'll see traffic stops. There are different makes and models of those. The newest are digital. They're obviously the most expensive, but they're also the easiest to use. And some areas, for example, Hillsborough County is trying to make the transition to all digital. So even VHS tapes will be difficult to submit for court purposes in the future. That's an example of some of the equipment issues, like cars, weapons, obviously, tools to use for active shooter intervention, entry-type tools. Those things make life much more pleasant for police officers.
Are there any other questions? With that, I want to thank you again, Chief Longo, for the time that you put into this project, as well as the other chiefs of police in the other state at the other state universities. Based upon the recommendations or the process of what you said we followed, that we will consider the recommendations later in the meeting. And I certainly ask if you would stay around, so if there are any further questions about this, you'd be available to respond.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Governor Parker. Thank you, Chiefs, for the great work, and your report is very thorough, and I certainly commend it to anyone who is interested in this topic. It's very thorough, very worthwhile reading. Let's move on now to Governor Chase. Governor Chase, if you'll present your committee's report on training of faculty.
Yes, my committee was charged with looking at the training of faculty to deal with at-risk students, and we also got into emergency situations. The committee was basically structured to use the Advisory Council of Faculty Senate as a sounding board, and we also benefited from the support of Regina Sofer on the Board of Governors. Essentially, faculty interact with students on a daily basis. Many faculty become involved in the lives of students. They recognize student behavior. They see disruptive students in the classroom. And so for a variety of reasons, it's important that faculty recognize problematic behaviors and how to deal with them, both in classroom situations and in other instances on the campus. Now, unlike other committees, we entered this looking at the budget situation in Florida and trying to do this at a no-cost basis, which means that essentially what we were concerned with was looking at resources that were already out there and looking at best practices elsewhere in order to see what was available for faculty in terms of training. We recognize this to be an ongoing process, and in looking at materials, the governor's task force had recommended that each Florida college and university develop multimedia programs, and we are taking advantage of that. Examples of this: there is an online training program at the University of Central Florida in the Vice Provost's office, And there's also a video that was produced by Florida International University called Losers Not Loners that will be distributed later to the Board of Governors, which can be utilized for training both faculty and students, and intriguingly includes the Chancellor's daughter in a starring role, which needs to be noted. Essentially, the UCF training that is being done now for faculty is mandatory, as was consistent with the gubernatorial directive. There are two different programs that are available. One is through the Office of the Provost. The other is through police training, who will also come directly to the different departments to provide this training. We do have some recommendations for training at-risk students, and we have a list of online resources that will be distributed through the Advisory Councils of Faculty Senates to the faculty senates for distribution to different faculty, and also other recommendations as to dealing with an emergency situation from a faculty perspective. Thank you. Are there questions?
Thank you, Dr. Chase. At this point, what I'd like to do is go ahead and take up each of the recommendations from subcommittees so we can move those on to the Budget Committee tomorrow morning for consideration. Governor Martin, would you like to make your initial recommendation? And this committee will merely be accepting the report. We will move it forward to Governor McDivitt's committee in about a minute, and then she will make the recommendation to the Budget Committee for tomorrow morning's meeting. Governor Martin.
Yes, in the information that you have before you, there are three sets of recommendations. Recommendations for the Board of Governors, and there are a set of recommendations for the university system, and then a general set of recommendations. So at this point, I would move the recommendations that are listed for consideration.
Governor Martin has moved that the task force accept the recommendations of his subcommittee as listed. Any second?
Second.
And a second, any discussion? Questions for Governor Martin? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Carries. Thank you, Governor Martin. Governor Parker.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, as I indicated in my report earlier, the recommendations from the SUS Chiefs of Police are found on pages 12 through 18 of the report that was submitted to the committee and to the Board of Governors for the documents. At this time, what we'd ask is that the committee would, in fact, accept the report from the Chiefs of Police and move the recommendations as submitted.
There's a motion to accept the report from the Chiefs of Police and the subcommittee, as well as the recommendations contained therein. Is there a second to the motion? Got a second. Any discussion or questions for Governor Parker? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed. Motion carries. Governor Chase.
And our recommendations specifically involve working with the Advisory Councils of Faculty Senates to ensure that the training of faculty takes place. There is a secondary recommendation that's not included on the list, that an emergency phone number be provided at each university that will go into faculty phones, because most faculty have a phone that they carry for time and for calls, and that would be the most efficient way in which to make an emergency call is by simply pressing a number, and we're going to encourage faculty at each institution to include such an emergency number within their one press code on faculty phones.
Thank you, Governor Chase. Motion to accept the committee report and the recommendation as stated and as appended by Governor Chase. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion or additional questions for Governor Chase? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed. Let me thank all three of you and your task force and staff for an inordinate amount of work over the last 11 months. I know this has been very busy. The work is important. It's meaningful, as we learned just a couple of weeks ago here at FAMU, where we had a terrific response in place, and hopefully we'll never have to deal with that tragedy again. Hopefully some of these recommendations, if we can put them in play and get them funded, will avert or minimize any subsequent tragedies in the future. We'll deal with these issues, assuming they come out of Governor McDivitt's committee. We'll deal with the budget issues tomorrow morning at the Budget Committee. At this time, Governor McDivitt, I'd like to close our task force and turn the meeting back over to you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Governor Perez. At this point, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Governor Marshall, who chaired the Mental Health Continuum of Care and Related Legal Issues Subcommittee of the Student Affairs Committee.
Well, thank you, Madam Chairman. The subcommittee's concern for mental health continuum of care and related legal issues was a very serious one. We began by reviewing the recommendations of the gubernatorial task force that has been referred to here earlier. We had sent a mental health document, a questionnaire to public universities asking about the services that they provide, both on campus and through referral to community agencies, from education through prevention, intervention, treatment, and aftercare. Board staff worked with an interinstitutional legal issues work group, one of two work groups, the other made up of student affairs and counseling center personnel. You have materials, board members, relating to these two work groups. We reviewed these carefully and then had a conference call on February 26th of this year to discuss those items and review some new ones. Based on those deliberations and that conference call, we have the following to recommend. First, that institutions individually and part of the state university system should draw on promising practices identified in this and other reports to continue review of this important matter, to review policies, procedures, and services across the whole mental health continuum of care. University personnel can take some steps immediately to implement some of the promising practices and continue studying to think about long-term improvements. The second recommendation notes that the gubernatorial task force recommended that each university should develop a multidisciplinary crisis management team to review individuals and incidents that represent what we believe to be an at-risk situation on the campuses. All of our institutions have formal response teams now in place. But we recommend, this subcommittee recommends, that each institution should examine those structures carefully, look carefully at what we're doing now, make certain you have a centralized reporting system with a single point of contact to collect and disseminate information that everybody needs to have. In addition to having a multidisciplinary team that focuses on crisis management, institutions should have teams or structures in place to discuss students who are not at the crisis stage, but who might nevertheless represent a problem of concern. Our third recommendation has to do with the legal work group and its the limited accountability or limited ability of an institution to share information and records with other institutions in which the student may now be currently enrolled. That is, a student who transfers from our institution to another one. This is a pretty serious concern. There are both state and federal statutes that have to do with the sharing of information. And the Florida goes by the acronym FERPA, F-E-R-P-A, which stands for something like educational. Ryan, what's it stand for? You're a member of the committee. If you don't know, Sheila does, and if she doesn't, we'll call on Dottie Manier. FERPA? Okay, thank you. The Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. There's both a Florida FERPA law and a federal law. And we think the federal law does a better job of protecting the rights of families and students while permitting the transfer of information from an institution to another institution to which the student transfers. That, we think, is a big gap in the Florida law, and we believe that the Board of Governors should look into this and determine whether we should not ask that a change be made in the Florida law. And the fourth recommendation, our institutional legal work group, beg your pardon, I just addressed that, didn't I? Number 5, the gubernatorial task force made a specific recommendation that the state university system should examine additional funding sources. Let me say that the recommendations for counselors, as presented by the International Association of Counseling Services, says that there ought to be one counselor to handle this kind of problem for every 1,500 students. The national averages, the national standards in the United States, are one for about 1,960 students. The figures in Florida are much more discouraging than that. We don't come close. If we were to increase our counseling staffs to the point where we meet the international recommendations, meaning one for every 1,500 students, that would require 92 additional counseling personnel in the state university system. Or if we were to meet the standards applied elsewhere in this country, that would be 49 additional counselors. The first of those charges would be about $5,750,000 for the current year. The second would be $3,069,000. And we recognize that when you start talking about figures like that today in the state university system of Florida, you've got a real problem. Nevertheless, we feel obliged to tell the universities that we have a potential problem in Florida. We like to think that it'll never happen here, but that's probably what the folks at the university at Virginia Tech and Northern Illinois felt too. We hope it will never happen here, but we do want to emphasize that there are things that must be considered if we're to vouchsafe the safety of our students and faculty, indeed our university communities, that we ought to be doing. And I guess the final recommendation is a request that university leadership, presidents, student affairs, and vice presidents in particular, look carefully at your practices now and determine whether there's anything else you can do, should be doing, even with the available resources, limited resources available to you. Oh yes, one other recommendation that I think makes a lot of sense. The state counseling center directors from public and private universities ought to coordinate with one another. Because if there is ever an institution of the kind we've seen at those other two universities that happens either in the state university system or in any of the independent institutions, we ought to be considering ways to marshal our forces, join together, and address those problems of concern to all of us. With that, Madam Chair, I think I've reported on the deliberations of our subcommittee, and I'd be glad to try to respond to any questions anybody may have.
Does anybody have any questions before we, what I'd like to do really is to go through all of the various recommendations, and since this is a recommendation directly from our committee, well, actually, the subcommittee needs to recommend it to the full committee, so would you like a motion that the subcommittee recommend to the full Student Affairs Committee the recommendations?
Do you mean to set those in writing and transmit them to you?
No, just because as a matter of protocol, we're next going to take up each of the recommendations by the full Student Affairs Committee.
I get it. Yes, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, I'll so move as a member.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further question or discussion on that from the subcommittee? Okay, hearing none, so many in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry, I took over your chairmanship.
Glad to have you do it.
Okay. All right, so now we're back to the full committee of the Student Affairs Committee, and we have all of the recommendations from the task force as well as the Mental Health Subcommittee before us, and I would like to turn it over now to Governor Perez to review those recommendations again with the Student Affairs Committee.
Madam Chair, the Emergency Response Task Force pushed along 3 recommendations to your Student Affairs Committee for consideration. The first coming from Governor Martin's committee with regard to emergency notification review. some of the yellow sheets that are attached. We discussed them. The second page of the yellow sheet, or page 6, I believe, of the agenda, sets forth $13,845,520 worth of costs with regard to the 11 universities, with some basic detail as to the various elements of equipment that have been recommended by the individual universities for purchase. And the first recommendation of the task force, the Student Affairs Committee, is that those costs be recommended to the Budget Committee for consideration tomorrow morning, Madam Chair.
Hearing the recommendation, is there a second to that motion? Is there any discussion or any question? Hearing none, so many in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Madam Chair, the second recommendation came from Governor Parker's survey and work with the state university system, chiefs of police, and others with regard to the equipment needed and the active shooter intervention equipment and training needs for the state university system campuses. They're on page 11 of the packet. They're also appendices C. They're the green pages attached. The requests and the required funding from each of the universities is set forth therein, and the total is $590,476, and we would move that recommendation to your committee for consideration, Madam Chair.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion or questions? So many in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I'd like to ask a question, though, to the Chancellor. Have you had an opportunity to go before any legislative committee with respect to these specific matters for notification systems and police officers and things of that nature?
We did make a presentation last year, Madam Chair, and just yesterday we went before a Senate committee that was meeting, and we did indicate that we would be having a full discussion today of these matters, and we did, because that was the venue, the only venue that was afforded, we did indicate that we would have recommendations in these several areas.
Were you able to give them an idea, however, of the cost of these recommendations and what they covered?
Yes, we were.
So they've already heard these numbers that we just approved to be passed on to our Budget Committee?
Yes, and with all due respect to the committee had charged us with bringing back a full recommendation, recognizing that this was going to be a very difficult year financially, and I did state that at the beginning. Our presentation was within the context of a K-12 presentation, which the committee had requested, which would be an entire education delivery system request.
Okay, but it was clear to that committee what the university system was recommending as their need in these two areas?
Yes, we reflected the recommendations that we believed you would be receiving today.
Could I also ask, in that committee, they did not concern themselves with the prevention aspect of it in areas other than notifying and law enforcement? In other words, this mental health piece is a separate thing?
Yes, it is. Yes,
okay, so that was not, we didn't miss an opportunity?
No.
Okay.
Governor, I had a couple of more recommendations, Madam Chair. Governor Parker has reminded me that I failed to incorporate the recommendations from pages 12 through 18, the additional recommendations of our task force, as well as the recommendations with regard to additional funding requests, including salary adjustments, totaling $3.6 million. So we would move also the recommendations from pages 12 to 18 in the report for consideration.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, so many as favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign.
And Madam Chair, finally, I would like to move the recommendations of Governor Chase's committee with regard to faculty training. Fortunately, there is no financial impact attached to Governor Chase's recommendations. However, the recommendations are worthy of consideration and acceptance by this committee, and we so move.
A second? Second. Any further discussion? Okay, so many in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. All right, Governor Martin.
Yes, Governor Perez, I'd like to also have you to do the same for the emergency notifications, pages 7 through 10. There were recommendations in 3 different sections for the Board of Governors, University System, and also general recommendations.
No dollars attached?
Included in some recommendations of the university, someone asked a question regarding the need for emergency management coordinator. And there were 5 of the 11 universities that had a person who was dedicated 100%. The committee felt that there should be someone dedicated at each of the universities. So there may be embedded in the overall recommendations coming forward cost associated with it, yes.
You've heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? So many in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Okay, that brings us now to the recommendations just heard from Dr. Marshall, and I would direct your attention to the handout that you have in your folder that just briefly identifies the full recommendations, and these do not have any immediate financial implications, so none of these would require a referral to the Budget Committee, but there are some things that we will direct the universities to do. And Governor Marshall, jump in here if you want, but I'm just going to review them very quickly. Number 1 is promising or implementation of the best practices that were identified in more detail in the full report. Having multidisciplinary behavioral consultation, crisis management teams, and centralized reporting systems within the institutions, guidance regarding the sharing of information from education records across the institutions, and for the board through staff to further study Florida FERPA and federal FERPA and identify changes that we might, whether or not to request changes in Florida to more consistently track the federal law, which would allow us to share information within the system upon transfer, which we cannot do at the present time. And also the federal, and to keep us apprised of changes to federal law, because there has just recently, I think yesterday, had federal regulations filed for consideration. It'll be some time through that process before those are adopted. And the last recommendation, I would ask staff to, in adopting this, to clearly write up this recommendation and have it sent to each of the institutions, because what it does is request that each institution look carefully at how their student activity fees are spent, and I'm kind of combining the two. To determine within there the most important priorities, and if they have cap room, to consider how they can best utilize that cap room to make sure they have as broad a counseling and advising system as possible to meet the needs of their student body population, because every article you read, we know this is the stress and other mental illnesses are becoming more and more of an issue, and so we need to make sure we have available the kinds of things that we need to do. But most importantly, if there is no cap room and priorities are what they are, to come up with recommendations as to alternative funding sources, whether there might be a specific fee for this purpose or some other method of funding the appropriate number of counselors that we may need. And so those are the 5 recommendations. Could I have a motion that we adopt those? Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion?
Governor,
Yes.
just lest anyone think we are putting forth almost $18 million worth of recommendations without an understanding of where we are in the budgetary system. I just want to make it clear. The task force and this committee has been charged with creating an environment of safety on our campuses. That environment of safety is not dependent upon the state's economy this year, next year, or the following year. We certainly understand the realities of the budget program We understand that there are challenges this year, possibly challenges next year. We may be asking some of the universities to go back and prioritize some of these requests, but we were tasked with finding the solution to the extent that there can be a solution, or at least the best way to try to protect our students, and I think the task force and this committee has done that within the realm of excellence. Now, budget realities being what they are, we understand there may be some changes to that, but advancing these numbers is the only responsible thing we can do as a body, and then we'll deal with the budgetary crisis when and as we can, and priorities may have to be made. But I just wanted to put on the record that, yes, this board absolutely understands the budget crisis that we're under, but we also have 380,000 students and over 3,000 buildings to protect. We were charged with coming up with those recommendations, and we've done so.
Right, and I mean, not only do we, the institutions and the institutions that we oversee have the responsibility for proper priority, but then again, the legislature has to make those decisions as well. So I think that we have covered, did we vote on these? Yes, we did. I think that we have covered everything that we need to do in this committee. Is that correct? Pardon? Oh, yes, I'm sorry. You had before you the minutes from our last meeting. Has everyone had an opportunity to take a look at them? And if so, does anybody have suggested corrections or modifications? Can I have a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, any objection? Hearing none, the minutes are adopted. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Done. We'll begin the next, our meeting begins, or? Okay, our meeting, the full Board of Governors meetings will be. Okay, the Facilities Committee will begin at 8 a.m. and the full meeting begins at? Right after we're finished. About 10 o'clock.